President Trump has called the newly elected president of Brazil. Jair Bolsonaro is a far-right former army captain and is reportedly already planning a visit to the United States sometime soon. Bolsonaro's victory follows a polarizing and violent campaign. You may remember Bolsonaro. He was stabbed in the stomach last month while campaigning.
Dubbed the Trump of the tropics by the media, Bolsonaro has attacked women, gay people, even Brazilians of color. But he swept into power following decades of government corruption and a tanking economy. Bolsonaro is also known for his pro-dictatorship comments, but was all about democracy in his acceptance speech.
You are my witness that I will be an advocate for defending the Constitution, of democracy, of freedom. This is my promise. It's not one of a political party. It's not the word of a man. It's an oath to God. Brazil will no longer be different from the countries of the developed world. We will seek bilateral relations that add to the economic and technological value of Brazilian products. We will restore international respect for our dear Brazil.
Joining us now from Rio de Janeiro is I24NEWS international affairs correspondent Bianca de Nene. Bianca, what does Bolsonaro's victory mean for Brazil? What can we expect to see under his government?
Well, Tal, that's a really good question because Bolsonaro is famous for speaking his mind. He's made a lot of controversial comments. He's promised a lot, but we don't actually know that many details about what he wants to do. Now, we do, of course, know who supports him. He's supported by the Christian evangelicals in Brazil, a rising movement, an increasingly powerful movement. He's supported by the agro-business. He's supported by the arms lobby. He's supported by the military. So we know where his priorities are. He's going to focus on security and on being tough on crime and on conservative Christian values. And we also know where his priorities are not. He is unlikely to focus anything on climate or the rights of minorities. And all of this really represents the deep divisions in Brazil right now. Half the population thinking one thing, half the population thinking another thing. And I've spent the last few days here in Rio talking to a lot of Brazilians, and let's take a listen to what two of them had to say today.
Bolsonaro's proposal is something quite different, and I think that lots of progress will be achieved.
I am feeling deeply saddened, concerned, and I am honestly afraid of what is going to come.
You know, it's so interesting, Bianca, to hear those clips. What's the general mood that you've been getting from people in Rio? I mean, is there a sense of excitement that Bolsonaro has won and supporters, they prevailed, or are more people worried?
Well, look, at least here in Rio de Janeiro, the results were barely out before people took to the streets and erupted in celebrations. I mean, it's very clear that people were so excited for something new, at least here in Rio de Janeiro. And partially that's because Rio de Janeiro has been hit particularly hard by this wave of crime and violence that has hit Brazil. We saw just last year 64,000 people murdered. That's a record high. So when Bolsonaro comes out and says that that is going to be his priority, that really hit home for a lot of people. That said, I want to reiterate how divided Brazil is. And I think really the question going forward, the most important thing to look at now is, will Bolsonaro be able to bridge those divisions, or is he going to create an even bigger gap?
Bianca, Bolsonaro is often compared to President Trump due to his unfiltered style and an outsider approach to traditional politics, although he's been around for years. Does he and President Trump share similar values?
Absolutely. I mean, he's dubbed the Trump of the tropics for a reason. He very much respects Donald Trump. He praises him a lot. And Trump, of course, was very quick to congratulate him and to congratulate the people of Brazil for their, quote, excellent choice. And we also heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, who also spoke with Bolsonaro earlier today. Of course, Bolsonaro has been very pro-Israel and said that he will want to move the Brazilian embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He said that he wants to visit Israel first. So really the eyes of the world right now are on Brazil and what Bolsonaro will do with this giant of a country.
International affairs correspondent Bianca de Nene reporting live from Rio. And Bianca, thanks for that. We appreciate it.
Let's just remind the viewers that Bolsonaro is the guy who said that he would rather see his son dead in an accident, killed in an accident, than gay. He also told a congresswoman she's ugly and doesn't deserve to be raped.
I mean, I suppose it's a reminder that for people who are so angry about crime and corruption that they're willing to tolerate intemperate remarks or things that are certainly not politically correct, that might even be offensive to a lot of people, on the belief that, well, maybe that person, though, can solve these more serious issues, as they think, in terms of crime and corruption.
They're very unsatisfied with traditional politics. Yeah. In another shocking election twist, German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced she will not seek a fifth term in 2021 and will step down as head of her party in December. Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, the CDU party, and her coalition party both saw heavy losses this weekend in regional elections.
Vacating the party leadership is reportedly seen by some as a concession to her party that is designed to quiet calls for her resignation. Merkel has faced growing criticism since 2015 when she allowed more than 1 million immigrants from war-torn Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan to cross the border and enter into Germany.
It's an end of an era.
Yeah, I mean, if she does step down, for sure.
She's been for 18 years the head of the party. Yeah. Here in the United States, President Trump launched a fresh attack on the media in the wake of the mass shooting at the synagogue in Pittsburgh and the series of pipe bombs sent to top Democrats and Democratic supporters. Mr. Trump blamed the media.
The president tweeted, "There is great anger in our country caused in part by inaccurate and even fraudulent reporting of the news. The fake news media, the true enemy of the people, must stop and open an obvious hostility and report the news accurately and fairly." What is the president getting at? To discuss all this, let's bring in Sanford Schramm, a political science professor at Hunter College, and Matthew LaRosiere, a contributor to Young Voices and a Second Amendment gun rights and firearms policy writer. Sanford, first to you, what was your reaction when you heard about that tweet?
Well, I think the president is trying to deflect attention away from himself. Polls that are coming out this afternoon are indicating that a large majority of Americans think that his rhetoric inflames white supremacists.
Matthew, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, she said today that the only ones to blame for these crimes are the individuals who committed them, and not at all the president, as some people in the country suggest. She also said that nobody should blame Bernie Sanders, for example, for the shooting of Congressman Steve Scalise. Is it a fair equation?
Well, it's not fair to point the blame at any one person, especially when political polarization has been continuing in this country for over 30 years. I don't think Donald Trump can reach that far back into the past. For decades, we've seen every year, this is the most brutal campaign. I mean, look at the headlines from 2008, 2012. We always thought things were getting more polarized. It's been going on for a long time. Trump might crystallize it, and he might embody it in ways that other politicians don't, but he's certainly not the cause of this rift.
I would agree with you on that, but Matthew, do you think it's appropriate for the president, in the wake of the pipe bombs that were mailed to CNN, in the wake of the horrific attacks in a synagogue this weekend, to come out on this Monday and say that the media is the true enemy of the American people? The media, what does the media have to do with this violence?
Well, I share the question mark with what you're saying. It does seem odd. The media clearly has nothing to do with the violence, although the media might play a part in not understanding how the political feelings of people in this country are developing. Most people still aren't extremely on one end of the side of the other. In fact, most people tend to, have some ideas that can be identified as conservative and some that could be identified as more liberal. And instead of speaking to the vast majority of people, if we continue to have a polarizing rhetoric, we can drive the problem worse, instead of embracing the fact that more Americans than we might think might have some libertarian sensibilities.
But Sanford, let me ask it this way about the media. Maybe it is the president's harsh rhetoric, but combined with what people see, the discourse, the political debate that people watch on media screens, maybe the president's rhetoric is what giving them a gun, these people. I'm just trying to use a metaphor, but the bullets come from the political discourse they watch online or on screens.
No, I think you're absolutely right. The president is the president of the United States. One of his primary responsibilities is to stand for the country as a whole, to unite us, to bring us together. Instead, Donald Trump, especially given how much he's influenced by Steve Bannon, is consciously trying to be the divider-in-chief. His political strategy is to polarize us and pull us apart so that people have to choose whether they're going to be with him or not, regardless of the consequences. And it's a very diabolical, dangerous, irresponsible, self-serving political strategy.
But isn't that strategy available to him in part because of the media? I'm not saying that it's the right strategy, but look, when people look up and they've lost faith in institutions, and they look up at the major cable networks who are spending 24/7 talking and speculating about Donald Trump and pushing out any other news around the world or a lot of other news in the United States, why shouldn't people be infuriated at media as an institution?
Trump is winning. He's demonizing the press and deflecting attention away from their efforts to highlight his profligate lying and his irresponsible inflaming of incendiary rhetoric. And the fact of the matter is, I think, to the extent that the press is complicit, it's this failure to actually call him out for doing this, acting totally out of norms of conventional liberal democratic practices in a way that threatens the viability of our very political system. And this, both sides do it. We have to be fair and balanced. Kind of rhetoric that the press historically is too vulnerable to participating in is its big failing.
But Matthew, do you think that it might be the reaction to what the president is saying from politicians, from people in the subway, from the media, that's generating the very inflammatory, dangerous situation that we have?
Well, what I see most often that Trump does is react, and he does react in an extremely aggressive way. But I think that the polarization and the divide that we see is really the result of the fact that, I mean, yes, it's as the other guest was saying, this is unlike what we experienced in the past, but we've also had a government unlike what we've experienced in the past over the past several decades, where we federalize everything and we try to govern this country as if it's as if it was one massive state. So as we try to federalize and collectivize everybody, we realize that there's more differences at stake, and that perhaps, you know, making such broad and large policy decisions for, you know, at once for the entire country is the real problem here. And that happened under a Democratic administration, and it is also happening under a Republican administration. As they take the same power grabs, you find that there's a rift in people. You can't, one approach doesn't work for everybody, and that's why we were designed to have more effective local governments.
Sanford, I saw you shaking your head.
Well, it's simply not true. The federal government's smaller now proportionately than it was 30 years ago. We're hollowing out the welfare state. We're retrenching. The federal government has a much smaller presence. Even under Democrats like Obama and Clinton, we shrunk the size of the deficit. We're pulling back. We're living through a profoundly conservative era that Trump is doubling down on.
Sanford Schramm and Matthew LaRosiere, we appreciate you both coming on. It's an interesting conversation, and I have a feeling, Tal, this will not be the last time that we have a debate over Donald Trump's rhetoric and whether it's gone too far and whether it's contributing to the coarseness of our discussions and about politics and everything
pretty
else.
Clear that the lesson from 2016 hasn't been learned, and that was supposed to be tolerance, and tolerance is not supposed to be an asset of one side of the aisle.
I agree. I agree 100%. By the way, we have a lot coming up tonight on Stateside, 9 o'clock. We're going to try to give people a break from all the horrible news. We've got some really funny videos for folks in Cirque du So Strange and a pretty good on this day. But
everyone needs this break.
Yes, we need a break. But that'll do it for this hour. Stay tuned for much more on I24 News. We'll be right back.